And so, oh wow, oh yeah, there we go. We're on now. There we go. So yeah, so we're gonna look at the book of Joshua, mostly an overview, but you know, this was something that I enjoy. I enjoyed reading for the most part, and so, we know that Joshua is the leader. He's the leader of the army. He was obviously second in command at one point with under Moses. And like I said, usually for the most part, we kind of look at the Battle of Jericho, and it's like that's it. And so we're gonna look a little bit deeper into kind of his life and what we can learn from him. And so he's from the tribe of Ephraim. Obviously half tribe with Manasseh because of Joseph being the son of Jacob in Genesis. And so, but since he was specifically a commander or the leader of God's army, I actually found this. I found this website today, and it was called coffeeordie.com, and I don't know why I saw it from there, but I don't know if anyone keeps up with like baseball. They have this stat called WAR, and it's like wins above replacement, and basically the stat is basically how much value is that person to the team. That's kind of how I like to. That's basically the summary of what the WAR stat is in baseball. And for some reason, some guys on the internet were like, well, let's do that with like military leaders. And I don't know, I'm a nerd, so I like that stuff. And so it's just kind of funny that like the top five, so here's our like basically top five military leaders of all time, just to kind of start it off for Joshua. And so number 5 was Khalid ibn al-Walid. I don't know who that is, but he won 14 battles against the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Persians. So that's something pretty significant about him. Obviously, 14 battles is a lot, and the fact that he won most of those is really impressive. And then the next guy, number 4, was Takeda Shingen. He was in Japan. He fought in 18 battles. It doesn't really say how much he won or lost or anything, but obviously if he's ranked above the previous guy, then I figured he won probably a little bit more than him. And then the number 3 guy was Arthur Wesley, the first Duke of Wellington. He was a commander of 18 battles, and he was one of Napoleon Bonaparte's arch nemesis. And so he's a pretty good military leader. Then number 2, we have Julius Caesar, and most of us know him. His tactics were way more strict and risky than a lot of the others. He may not have won as many battles, but his wins above replacement was so high because of how much he led, I guess, in that time, and so how much impact he had on the army. And then of course, number 1 was Napoleon Bonaparte. If you don't know who he is, I don't know what to tell you, I guess, but his wins above replacement average was like above all these other generals that are listed here, and his tactics were amazing. Of course, to us with war, we don't like to think of good tactics like that, but according to those stats, they were pretty amazing. And so those were the top 5 guys that made an impact on their armies, and they left an impact before basically they replaced the guy before them and did way better. And so just to kind of start us off thinking about, well, I think if we included, Bible times in this, I would say Joshua is probably in the top 5, top 3 there as well. I was looking at it today, and it said he won 17 of his 18 battles, and one of those battles was at least, thousands upon thousands of armies that were facing him, and he just prevailed, and it's just amazing to see that. And I think just because he's a military leader, I don't think I think that it doesn't mean we can't learn anything from him, because we all have different jobs, different occupations, but we all are also fighting a spiritual battle, and that's of course against the world, and so that's what we're going to look at tonight, is some of Joshua's leadership qualities that we can also incorporate into our lives. And so some characteristics that I found on a website called weform.com. It listed about 10 characteristics that you can see in a good leader, but tonight we're going to look at about 5 of those, because I don't think we have enough time for 10. I don't know, maybe I talk fast, so we'll have to see. But some characteristics that makes Joshua so successful is, number one, he was communicative, so he was able to communicate. Number two, he had mentorship, or he learned from people before him. He had confidence, he had resilience, and then he had a vision. And so those are the 5 things that we're going to kind of look at tonight with Joshua. So the first thing, obviously, is he was communicative. And what I mean by that is he was able to talk to other people, communicate with them, and he was also able to talk to God. Obviously, if he was, since he was, basically God's right-hand man at that time, God was talking to him all the time. But I think another thing that we can see is that he listens to him. He listens to him every single time in the book of Joshua. That's something that's pretty amazing. In chapter 1, right after we talked about those first 9-10 verses, it talks about in verses 10 through 15 of chapter 1, it says, "And Joshua commanded the officers of the people, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, prepare your visions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. And to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. But all the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brothers and shall help them, until the Lord gives rest to your brothers as he has to you, and they shall also take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to the land of your possession and shall possess it, the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise." So why did I read that? And so what we can see here is that we can see that Joshua, as soon as God says, be strong and courageous, the first thing he does is he goes to the officers. He goes to those leaders of those tribes, and he says, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is what we're going to do. Obviously, it's more of him commanding them, but he still acknowledges that they need to know what he just knew as well. And what that is that they need to be prepared to go across Jordan and fight to achieve Canaan. And in chapter 2, after Rahab hides the spies, we see that the spies come back, and in verse 23, they tell everything that happened to him, including that Rahab had hid them. Obviously Joshua was in a place where he wanted to know what happened there at Jericho. And so when we kind of look at that, I guess the best way to put it is that, yes, if you're hiding for about 3 days, you're probably, yes, you're scared for your life, but you're probably going to tell someone what just happened throughout all of that, when you come out of hiding. But the fact that Joshua was also in their place at one time was pretty amazing too, in that he was able to understand where they're coming from. And yes, he was their leader, and so they kind of had to tell him, but he was still able to communicate with them and understand what was happening, including what Rahab did for them. And so and so that's something that we can learn from Joshua, is that he was communicative. He was able to talk to other people about what was going on. And I think the same for us. We can learn the same things for us. I think we live in a world now where it really seems like we have to do everything on our own. I don't know if you guys ever think that, but we live in a world, especially after the pandemic, which I know it feels like a long time ago, but it really wasn't that long. With the pandemic, we've had some sort of feeling of isolation, and when we're isolated, that's when Satan tries to get us the most, I feel like. I don't know if you guys experienced that, but that's something that I've kind of understood, at least from talking with other people and the things I've dealt with, is that Satan tries to get you to feel like you're alone. And I think in order for us to not be alone, we got to reach out. We got to reach out to others. We've got to be involved in our congregation as well. And so that's something that I need to for sure learn myself. But ultimately, if we're going to win this battle for eternity, we have to allow others to help us when we need it most. And we have to be able to talk to people about that stuff. And even though we don't really see that Joshua was kind of in that place, we can still see he was communicating with other people. And so that's something we can learn from him. And the second thing we can learn is that he had mentorship, and that's what made him a great leader. When I talk about mentorship, I'm sure most of us know, but who was he second in command under before the book of Joshua? Who is basically the leader of Israel before him? Yeah, it was Moses. So I know. Usually I don't ask the simple stuff, but yeah. So Moses was the leader, and Joshua's in a way second in command. He was at least his successor, right? And in Deuteronomy, and so before that, what happened to Joshua? When we first learn of Joshua, it's in Numbers 13 and 14. What was going on when we first are introduced to Joshua? Yes, it was the spies. Yeah, him and Caleb, right? Yeah, it was him and Caleb. They were going to spy out. They were going to spy on the land of Canaan. Him and a bunch of other soldiers. And what happened was, everyone else was afraid of the situation that was going on, but Caleb and Joshua were the only two people to say, "Hey, we can fight. We can fight these people because we have the Lord on our side," right? And after he says that, what is it? After they say that, and everyone else doesn't believe they can win, what happens? What's a result of that? Yes, they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years until that generation died out, right? But obviously, we know the answer to this. Who were the only two people that were able to live through that? Yeah, that was Caleb and Joshua. Yeah. And I would say Joshua was kind of in the elderly stage when he became Moses' successor. And Caleb was too. But when we look at Joshua and Caleb, obviously we know that they were older, so they were probably more wiser, but that's not always the case. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, no, but anyway, but Joshua and Caleb, obviously, they picked up on a few things during those 40 years, don't you think? They probably learned a lot from they were probably around Moses probably just about all the time. At least you would think so, because everyone else died out, so obviously their friends probably died out too. So who'd they have left? They probably had Moses to talk to, but also they could see the example that Moses set for everyone else. But also, but also they saw an example of what not to do, and the Israelites did a pretty good job of showing them what not to do. And so we see that obviously Moses was someone that was willing to do everything for God, was willing to lead the people. He was also able to intervene for them as well when things didn't go their way. But Joshua probably picked up on some things that Moses maybe didn't do a good job of, and Joshua picked up on that and was like, that's not going to happen. Because, at the end of Joshua, I believe it's in verse 24, in chapter 24, and we'll talk about it on Sunday as well in my lesson. We'll talk about, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And not that Moses was going to let that happen, but, Joshua probably saw how things were going, and he was like, that's not going to happen with us. That's not going to happen with this generation. I'm not going to let that happen. And so that's kind of what I mean by mentorship, is that he was able to learn things not only from God, but he was also learn to pick up on some things that Moses may have done, and he was able to learn from him. And so we see that he was communicative. He had mentorship, and so now we're going to look at that. He had confidence. I remember when I was reading just about every battle Joshua had, he was always confident in what was going to happen. Even when they lost to the nation of I believe that's how you say it, AI, not artificial intelligence, but yeah, in chapter 11, verse 6. In chapter 11, we look at how Joshua is trying to conquer northern Canaan at this time. And when we look at that, it says, in all battles, Joshua always gave his best, and he knows that everything is for the Lord. In chapter 11, verse 6, this is when they're trying to conquer North Canaan, and, you have the king of Hazor, you have the king of Madon, and the king of Shimron, and Asaph, and then you have, Arabah, you have Napoth Dor, you have the Canaanites in the east and west, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, and the Hivites. You have all of these troops. It says in verse 4 that in number, it's like the sand that is on the seashore, that army. But God tells Joshua in verse 6, and the Lord said to Joshua, do not be afraid of them, for tomorrow at this time I will give over all of them slain to Israel. You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire. And so Joshua and all his warriors came suddenly against them by the waters of Merom, and fell upon them. And the Lord gave them into the hand of Israel. He struck them and chased them as far as Great Sidon and Misrephoth Maim, and eastward as far as the valley of Mizpah. And they struck him until he left nothing remaining. And Joshua did to them as the Lord said to him. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots with fire. When we look at these verses in chapter 11, we see that he had confidence. Yes, he may have had some fear at that time, but, Joshua always gave his best in those situations, and he knows that everything is for the Lord. The Lord tells Joshua, don't worry about the enemy. He's like, I got this. And the thing is, in verse 9 and 10, they ultimately end up destroying all of them, and even they did everything that God said that would happen. And in verse 15, it says there that in Joshua, just as the Lord commanded Moses his servant, so Moses commanded Joshua, and so Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses. And so Joshua, he had full confidence in what God was doing, and he ended up doing everything exactly like God told him to. To me, that's not only confidence, but that's trust in what he's doing. I think a lot of times, for me especially, and I think I could say this for most people in the church, evangelism is something that's really scary, isn't it? It's kind of scary to think about. It's something, we want to reach out to other people, but we don't know how it's going to turn out. We're afraid of rejection. I tell our kids it's like that in the dating world too. It can be scary. Afraid of rejection. But why I say that is, with evangelism, like Joshua, we got to have confidence in what we're doing. And what I mean by confidence is not only confidence that we can reach out to them, but also confidence that we know that what we're doing is right. And if we love our Lord enough, aren't we going to do everything we can to let other people experience the same things as us, be able to have that community where they feel like they belong, have someone such as God, that cares for them and helps them understand that they're loved, and that they don't have to always go back to this world that just experiences suffering and destruction. That's something that I think, for me, it's really scary to do, because even as a minister, I'm scared to reach out to people as well, because it makes me uncomfortable. And I think for a lot of us that can be the same thing. But we got to have confidence in what we're doing. If we truly believe in what we're doing, then we're going to reach out to others. And so that's why it takes practice. We got to do it at home by talking with our spouses. I forget we don't have kids here. Talking with our children about these things. Engaging in those spiritual conversations, so that way that can prepare us for when we go out into the world and talk to them. And so we see that here that Joshua had confidence, he had mentorship, and then he also had, once this loads, and he had mentorship, he had confidence, and he was communicative. And now the fourth thing is that he had resilience. And what I mean by resilience is that when things were tough, Joshua didn't let that define him. He didn't let the mistakes. He didn't let those mistakes define the rest of not only his life, but for the lives of Israel. And so we can look in chapter 7. We can look at the one battle that he lost, and that was in chapter 7. It says in verse 1, "But the people of Israel broke faith in regard to the devoted things, for Achan, the son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, on the tribe of Judah, took some of the devoted things, and the anger of the Lord burned against the people of Israel." And so we look at that. Before then, they just overcame Jericho, but they were defeated because people decided they were going to get their hands on some things that God told them not to get. And so that's kind of what we're looking at here. When we read chapter 7, when we go later into it, from verse 10 to the rest of the chapter, we see that the problem was with Achan. Achan was a guy that he ended up taking some things that he was not supposed to at Jericho. And so because of that, that's why they lost. But Joshua ultimately realized what that problem was, and he took care of it. Of course, he did it in a pretty violent way, as you probably could tell, Old Testament wars and stuff. But, what he did, when Joshua and the army was defeated by Ai, he figured out that Israel took the devoted things that was from Jericho, and it was Achan, and he was ultimately stoned to death for his disobedience to God. And, I want to kind of get past the stoning to death part because that's pretty violent. But when things go wrong for us, don't we need to, spiritually, don't we need to try and get to the bottom of why that's going on for us? And I'm not saying that, why is God allowing bad things to happen? I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is, when it's something that we are struggling with and we know what the problem is and we don't try to do anything about it, because if our lives are trying to reflect around Christ, then we need to let go of those things in the past. We need to let go of the things that may be keeping us from Him. And so when we know what that problem is and we don't do anything about it, then either the problem's going to get worse or, that's it. The problem is going to get worse. And so when we look at our lives, we need to reflect on, that's why we need these other, characteristics. We need to be able to talk to others about these things. We need to ask, we need to learn from people before us who have dealt with the same situation. We need to also have confidence in what we're doing, that we can move on from that. And so that's kind of what we can see here in Joshua chapter 7 was he found the problem and he solved it immediately. That's what he did. And so I just have one more thing, and then we'll be done tonight. But the last thing we're going to look at tonight is that after he had resilience, he was communicative, he had confidence, and he listened to his mentors. He ultimately had a vision. And, of course, God commanded him that vision. But, in chapter 1, we'll reread chapter 1 right there. It says in the first 5 verses there, it says, "After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, 'Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I had promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea toward going down the sun shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you.'" So when we kind of look at that and we can wrap this up, obviously we know God commanded him, like, this is what you're going to do for me. But as soon as we cross Jordan, all of Canaan is yours, but you have to work for it. And the thing about Joshua is that probably never left his mind ever since God told him that. He knew his purpose, and that was to bring peace. That was to bring peace and to go into Canaan and restore it for them. And so, God gave Joshua the vision that he wanted for his people. But if it were some of us, if it was someone like me, if I was told, you're going to get all this land, but you have to fight 18 battles, in order to do that, I don't know if I could do that. But the thing is, for us, for some of us, it may be, for our vision, for the most part, our vision is to get ourselves as close to God as we can and to help bring others with us. And I think that's something that we cannot leave in our minds. That should never leave our minds, ever. And so if we're to have those good leadership qualities in our world today, we have to keep that vision. We have to have confidence of what we're doing. We have to be resilient about the problems that are going on. We have to understand our mentors, and we also have to communicate with others with what's going on. And so that's all I got tonight for you guys. So thanks.